All right, hello MUCT 112L students. This is the week 10 remote lecture. It's a remote lecture for a dead week of winter quarter. All right, let's go ahead and begin by warming up. We're going to spend actually most of our time singing today. We'll look at a couple of different chords, but we're going to be singing largely through today's remote lecture. Let's start with major mode, 2, 3, 4, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Harmonic minor, ready, go. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. And melodic minor. And do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Let's review just briefly a couple of the things that we mentioned both in last Friday's class and in the week 9 remote lecture. Let's review just briefly two chords that are related. They were related such that they were placed kind of side by side in the Berkowitz book, treated together. One, of course, is a very, very, very important chord in both major and minor modes. The 5-7 chord, often known also as the dominant chord because of its function leading to do. Just keep in mind the tendency tones inherent here in both major and minor. Okay, so if we were in the minor mode, that would be raised, of course, to keep its dominant function, its quality as a major-minor 7th chord. T resolves to do, and Fa resolves downward to the 3rd. Mi or may. If it was in a minor mode, it would be may. Okay, and the closely related 7 diminished chord that we introduced in Friday's class. As you can see, has very much the same function. Same outward to inward motion with that diminished section of the chord. Because the 5-7 chord is the root and then a diminished chord on top. And a diminished 5th tends to want to move in to a 3rd. Okay, so T going to do, Fa going to mi, or to may, depending on our key. So just keep in mind what those tendency tones are, because just as in harmony, when you guys are doing chord progressions in your theory class, and there are certain notes within the chord that need to move one direction or the other, when these chords are outlined or treated melodically, they have the same tendencies. T still tends to go to do, Fa still tends to go to mi or to may. Okay, so let's go ahead and sing a couple of these. 7 chords, 7 diminished chords. Let's go to the Berkowitz, page 38. Page 38. And number 169. Okay, we're going to do a pair of these, one in major, the other in minor. The swaying, 169 and 170, will both be in D, one D major, one D minor. Okay, we'll begin with 169. They have given you the chord progression there, so you know where the 7 chord is. Let's give this one a try. Starts with a full ascending scale, or a full ascending triad, excuse me. 1 and 2 and do, mi, sol, do, ti, do, la, ti, la, sol, mi, do, ti, do, mi, fa, mi, re, do, mi, sol, fa, re, ti, do, mi, sol, do, la, fa, mi, fa, sol, mi, re, do, fa, re, ti, do. Okay, and you see in that last, very last measure there, they analyzed it as 5/7 to 1, even though you only had fa, re, and ti involved in that, which are the notes of the 7 diminished chord. Remember on Friday we were reviewing the fact that you don't need every single note of a triad or of a 7th chord to assume that the 7th chord or the triad is there. So what they're telling you, even though they are outlining the 7 diminished chord, because it is the very end of the measure and they're cadencing to the end, much more reasonable that if you were accompanying yourself on the piano to play 5/7-1 rather than 7 diminished 1, because 5/7-1 is a much stronger cadence. All right, let's do the same thing in 170. In 170, this time in harmonic minor mode, I believe. No, this is actually melodic minor mode. Yeah, it's melodic minor mode, you can tell, because in the second measure there is te opposed to the other t's. So this is melodic minor mode, though it is treated as harmonic minor mode for most of the time. Do, mi, sol, do. Let's try it. 1 and 2, E and do, mi, sol, do, ti, do, le, te, le, sol, mi, do, ti, do, mi, fa, mi, re, do, mi, sol, fa, re, ti, do, mi, sol, do, le, fa, mi, fa, sol, mi, re, do, fa, re, ti, do. Good. All right, let's do the next ones on page 39, number 171. These are not pairs anymore. These are singletons here. So 171, key of F minor. Okay. Let's try this one in 4/4 time. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Do, mi, sol, 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 le, sol. Fa, re, ti, ti, do, mi, re. Le, fa, mi, re, sol, mi, re, do. Fa, re, ti, re, do, re, mi, re, do. Good, all right? And you notice in the second line there, in the second line, le, fa, mi, re, sol, mi, re, do, a sequence, and they make you think that you're going to get the third part of the sequence. Fa, re, because it drops down a third like it did, but then it goes down the other third to outline the 7th. Fa, re, ti, re, do, re, mi, re, do. So that's a great way to deal with a sequence. So repeat it once, and then act like you're repeating it again, but change it just a little bit so you hear the sequence in your head, but it's enough of a variation that it keeps interesting. It remains interesting. All right, let's try number 172, C major. All right, this is a bit of a trick question. So I just gave you the tonic chord in C, do, mi, sol, do. And the question is, what is the first syllable of number 172? And up until now, the first 171 examples, the answer has either been do, mi, or sol. Here is an example of something beginning on fa, okay? The 7th of the 5/7 chord. Do, mi, sol, do, fa. It's going to start off fa, re, ti, do. Just a little warning, this is going to happen more and more. 1, 2, and 3. Fa, re, ti, do, re, mi, fa, re, ti, do. Re, mi, fa, re, ti, do, re, mi, fa, re, ti, do. Sol, la, sol, fa, la, sol, mi, sol, fa, mi, re, do, re. Fa, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, fa, re, ti, do. All right, so that is often how the 7 chord is outlined, or sometimes the implied 5-7 chord. Let's look at the next one. If you look below that on the page in 173, and you see the 6th chord. Let's talk a little bit about the 6th chord. Okay, in major mode, the 6th chord is a minor triad. La, do, me. And in minor, it is a major triad. Le, do, me. As far as tendency tones are concerned, among the chords, along with two, at least in the major mode, it doesn't have a whole lot of in the way of really strong tendency tones, maybe even less than 2. It has a predominant function, meaning that it functions before a 5 chord, usually leading into a 5 chord. 6 often will go to 2 or something like that as part of a circle progression. But it has la, do, and mi. And do, of course, being very important because it's the tonic. So this chord pivots really well with the 1 chord because it has 2 chord tones in common with 1. Okay? So all you have to do is drop the the A to a G, and then you have an inverted 1 chord. So the 1 and the 6 work very well together. In minor mode, it's a little bit different, although still similar. I mean, it has a predominant function like normal, but it does have an interesting scale degree in it, le. And remember, in both a natural minor mode, harmonic minor mode especially, and even the descending part of melodic minor mode, le, the lowered la, has kind of a downward leading tone tendency. So when this is encountered as a melody, which we're going to do here in a moment, you may see this chord in inversion or even in root position have somewhat of a tendency for that le to move down to sol. Okay, just like the natural minor scale, the other minor scales have that tendency. So let's sing a couple. We'll sing the first paired set, 173 and 174, and you'll see what I mean. Sol, do. All right, let's try this one. 1 and 2 and 3. Sol, do, mi, fa, la, sol, fa, re, do. Do, ti, la, do, mi, re. Do, ti, do, re, mi, fa, la, sol. Mi, la, mi, do, la, sol, fa, re, mi, fa, la, sol, fa, mi, do, ti, la, sol, do, mi, fa, mi, re, do. All right, so that one in major mode, dealing with the 6th chord and its predominant function. You may wonder, especially in the second half there, it just kept on going to la, 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 la several times without really seeming to go anywhere. And so I think you will find, when we go to 174 on the next page, page 40, you'll find that it is a much more effective melody in the minor mode because all of that shooting up to la is actually to le, which is pushing the tension forward by reflecting kind of that downward leading tone from le to sol. Let's see if you agree. So let's try this in minor mode. 1 and 2 and 3, sol, do, me, fa, le, sol, fa, re, do, do, te, te, le, do, me, re, do, ti, do, re, me, fa, le, sol, me, do, le, sol, fa, re, me, fa, le, sol, fa, me, do, te, le, sol, do, me, fa, me, re, do. So you can see all of those le pitches in, well, really from the ending of the first line throughout much of the second line, make much more sense in the minor mode because it's dealing with a tendency tone. In the major mode, it's dealing with a non-tendency tone, and so that la being there in the middle, not having any particular place to go, gets a little repetitious. But in this case, it doesn't feel repetitious because we are moving downward, we're building up tension and moving the melody forward. So that's one thing that you can do. All right, we're going to do only one kazez example, because the rest of them that we need to do are ensemble examples. So we're going to do that on Friday's class. But let's do one example, page 63 in the kazez, page 63, number 120. Number 120. There's a little discussion right above 120 where they talk about split measures. And as you have experienced, one of the inconveniences or one of the weird things about 12/8 or 12/4 or related kinds of meters is that the measures are really long. Okay, 12/8 measure just has a lot of notes in it, and it's a really wide kind of measure, especially if it has single and double subdivisions with 8th and 16th notes. It seems like the measure goes on forever. It's easy to get lost in it, and composers often have trouble fitting the right number of measures, into a line of music. Maybe only 2 will fit, or 2 will fit, but there's quite a bit of room, but not enough room for an entire measure. And often, although less now with computerized programs where they can fool around with the spacing and make it easier to fit things, but in older scores, when they were doing it by hand, they would often split 12/8 measures in half. And so if you look at 120, here, you'll notice at the end of the first line, there are only 2 beats and no bar line at the end of that line, because they have split that measure. Beats 1 and 2 on line 1 and beats 3 and 4 on line 2. So you can see they have split it there. It's not an earth-shattering change, but if you're keeping careful count of the measures, it might be a little confusing. But let's go ahead and go through this one. Make sure that you are subdividing carefully. This comes in on the of beat 4. Okay, 8th note pickup. 1 measure and we're in. And this is supposed to be a poco a poco crescendo from pianissimo to forte over the entire length of this. So see if you can figure this out. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T ki tiki tiki T T T T T T T T T tiki T T T tiki tiki T T T tiki T tiki T T tiki T tiki tiki T ki tiki T T T T tiki T T tiki 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 T off. All right. So that's all we're going to do for today. But for Friday's class, make sure you come on time, and come at all, of course, but on time for Friday's class. It'll be our last meeting of the quarter, of course, and we'll be talking a little bit about your one-on-one exams during the exam week, and kind of what will be involved in all of that, since it'll be the first time you guys have done it here. And we'll also introduce a couple of new concepts. As I promised in last Friday's class, I will introduce you to pre-harmonic dictation 1. We've done pre-harmonic dictation 1, pre-harmonic dictation 2. Now we'll go into pre-harmonic dictation 1 using the actual chord symbols, the Roman numeral chord symbols. It'll be a pretty easy transition for you, okay? I'm looking forward to it. We'll see you on Friday.